Let's head over to southeastern Africa. The International Monetary Fund says it's likely to revise Mozambique's economic growth forecast for 2024 lower compared to a prior forecast of 4.3%. Now, the fund says that civil unrest in the wake of a hotly disputed election held in early October has affected business operations, including those of important mining companies, and at times it's led to the closure of key trade corridors, especially with her neighbours over to the south and the west, South Africa, for example. In the meantime, a cyclone hit the northern part of the country over the weekend, causing widespread damage. A constitutional council is expected to make a ruling on the election outcome and its validity on Monday, the 23rd of December. And there are fears of widespread chaos if the judges do not find in favour of the opposition. The IMF said economic growth was slowing even before the protests started, while negotiations for a new loan will only resume once the political situation in the country has been resolved. Let's bring in Gabriel Manguele. He's a project coordinator at the Center for Democracy and Human Rights, joining us now live from Maputo. Gabriel, thank you very much for your time this evening. So the opposition leader calmed protests to some extent this week, but assuming the Constitutional Council validates the election outcome next week, Monday, what do you think he'll do next?
Well, thank you for hosting me. Well, looking historically at the Constitutional Council, usually to validate the results coming from the National Election Commission. And for this year, we're not expecting something different than that. We can have perhaps a reduced number of seats, but the overall result is going to be the same. So looking at that scenario, I'm happy. I mean, I would like to share with you that actually the plan has already been set in motion in terms of what's going to happen next. The opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane, has already put a plan in motion for both outcomes. What I'm talking about is the next phase of the protest. You know that these protests have phases, and we are now in the fourth phase of the fourth stage. And the next one is the Turbo V8 phase, which actually is to say that depending on the result that's going to be announced by the Constitutional Council, the Mozambican people will know what to do. What I'm trying to say here is that on Monday, on the 23rd, depending on the result that the Constitutional Council is going to tell us, the world, people already know what they are supposed to do. Venancio Mondlane has already given guidelines to the people on how to proceed in this Turbo V8 phase.
Is there any chance that the Constitutional Council could order a rerun of the election?
At this point, we can consider all hypotheses, all scenarios. The most likely, as I said, is to have them just reducing the number of seats from Frelimo party to give some to the other parties. But there has also been some consideration, especially from the opposition parties, that this should be the election would have a rerun. But Frelimo has not yet, the ruling party in this case, has not yet shown availability to rerun the elections. So it's just, if they go that way, it'll just be because of the protests, of the pressure that the protesters are doing on the street. So we're evaluating. I mean, we are in a scenario where everything is possible. We don't know yet. We likely doubt that even the Frelimo members also know what's going to happen next. They're still deciding. There's a lot of tension in the country. There's a lot of pressure from the protesters. So everything is possible at this stage.
Indeed, and we'll get to the economic ramifications in a moment. But 24 hours ago, yesterday essentially, the country's president, the outgoing president rather, Filipe Nyusi, said, he'd spoken with the opposition leader. Other than his pledge to the country saying, I will leave office in January, he's not going to try and extend his time in office through an emergency, declaring a state of emergency. Do we know anything else about what the pair spoke about?
Yes, about that talk, there's a lot. First of all, we need to set here two things very, very clear. First one, that this talk has been long waited. We have seen both of them, I mean, the president, Filipe Nyusi, and then the opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane, saying that they're available to talk. And this is the first time that they actually have engaged in a bilateral conversation. This is the first thing. The second one is that there's a lot of secrecy to the content of that conversation, to the content of that engagement. There's a lot of secrecy. You will see that we have both sides. We have two sides. We have the president, Filipe Nyusi, which is leaving the office in January, saying that the conversation was harmonious, was a peaceful conversation. But then we have Venancio Mondlane, the opposition leader, that says that in that conversation, just noticed that Filipe Nyusi is about to use the manifestations, the protests, as a way to extend his time in the office. So from these two positions and the secrecy around that conversation, we can only speculate and say that perhaps they didn't reach a common ground in the conversations that they had, to say that there is no progress to get to a middle ground in terms of resolving the situation that Mozambique is in at the moment.
One last question for you very briefly, because we are seeing, different entities saying we're going to essentially reduce the forecast for economic growth in Mozambique this year. Standard Bank's unit in the country, for example, expecting GDP growth of just 2.5%. That's less than half of last year's figure. Assuming, for the sake of argument, this crisis drags on into 2025, what sort of economic damage are we likely to see?
Yes, about the economic damage, you will see that from the time the protests started in 21st October, you had different entities just shouting numbers. But the thing is that those estimates are not yet solid, but they give us a clear, somewhat a perspective onto what is happening in the country. And looking to the future, and based on these two months, I would put of protests, what's been happening. First is to clarify that these protests are not taking place all over the country. We have specific hotspots, mainly cities, like Maputo, like Nampula, like Pemba, like here in Shai, Gaza. So we have hotspots, not all over the country. So those estimates that people are just shouting out there are not actually capturing that this conflict is not, this demonstration is not taking place all over the different areas. So in terms of economic impacts, you will see that we have these different estimates, but the truth is that the Mozambican economy is suffering. The Mozambican economy is suffering due to these protests. We can see this from all three layers, just to make this perspective. In terms of first the macroeconomic effects, you will see that our GDP is slowing, and this third and fourth quarter, and this has implication naturally. Also, we have higher inflation. The projection, for example, for the GDP was in the beginning of the year was 5.5%, but now we have these slower projections.
Right.
And we have inflation because, we have supply chains that are being disrupted. Our main products here of consumption are coming from South Africa, for example. We have the border closed. That has serious implications to the cost of living. But there is also another layer, which is the public finances. The revenue collection has been slowing drastically. Till the third quarter, we only had 68% of revenue collection, that considering the projection that was made. And this also has implications to how the state, how the public service will be delivered upon in this period.